Okay, it is 5 o'clock and we will call the meeting to order.
Recording in progress.
This is the Land Use Transportation Committee Council meeting, and we're starting at 5 o'clock. And we will start our meeting with call to order, which we did, and now we'll go to public comment. This is where anybody can come to the podium and spend up to 3 minutes and give us your thoughts. And I have one pink sheet, and I do have one individual that will be here very late that wants to speak about our very last item, item K, so I told them they could do that. Did not have that on?
No, I think Barbara is the lady that.
Yeah, I was going to get to that.
Yeah, she's the one that emailed me, so I think it's just,
Oh, yeah,
I made it.
yeah, I know, I saw you bring this up.
That was one that we made.
Yeah. So do you want to wait until, you want to address the council now? Would be good. And then there's another one that's coming for actually the airport goal. So why don't we have our public comment, and Barbara, could you come up and address us? You've been here before, so thank you for coming back.
Mind if I get my glasses? Good evening, I'm Barbara Marsh. I'm a longtime resident, been in the same house for 28 years. A little background, I said the same thing at the council meeting, but I'll say it again. We had a trailer parked on a pad in front of our house for 15 years. My husband had health problems, so we sold it. Last summer, we bought an RV, a big RV. And in January, we got a notice that we could no longer have the RV at our house, that it had to be shorter than 22 feet long or 9 feet in height. I called and talked to the compliance lady. She said that, because I thought, well, what neighbor's calling on me? But she said, no, somebody drove around, and 20 people got the same for 20 people in the neighborhood. So we did move it to a storage place, and it was going to be, well, the first 2 months were half off, but then it was going to be $200 a month. I mean, it's a 2005 motorhome. Who's going to spend $200 a month forever to store something? And so my question is, number one, you have a rule that obviously 20 of us in the neighborhood didn't know about it. You know, we live in a middle-class neighborhood. We have middle-class RVs. They're not all $100,000 ones, but there's a lot of them. What are we supposed to do? I mean, are we going to have to, I'm hoping you'll change the rules on the size, because I think it's just, we live in the Pacific Northwest. People want to camp, we're kind of gotten lazy. I think we'd like to go in comfort and have something bigger than 22 feet. If you've got a family, that's not very big. And there's not very many of those. I'm hoping that you can come up with some kind of solution so that we can keep it at our house. I mean, it's not on the street. We have a side yard that we could possibly put it on that would be behind a fence, but with the current rule, you can't park it there. I mean, I don't understand why on our own property we can't park something. It's not on the street, so it's not blocking traffic or anything like that. So that's more my question, and, maybe some suggestions my husband and I were talking about is, I know there was someone that had spoken about, there's drug people that live in them, and they're abandoned and all that. Maybe have a permit. We'd pay for a permit for the year that we have to prove, we've got our tabs, we've got insurance, just something, because people can't afford storage. And there's not a lot of storage. We gave up our storage because they said we could bring it back, and it's back in front of our house. Somebody already rented the space. So the option is, number one, if you're going to make a rule like this, you have to let everybody know, because somebody in our neighborhood just bought a new RV, and I didn't measure it, but I don't know how big it is, and I'd be pretty upset if I just found out I bought a very expensive motorhome and I can't park it at my house. So that's all I have to say.
Barbara, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will be discussing this later this evening. It may take a while. We have a lot on our agenda, but.
Yeah, no, I saw that. We'd like to stay if that's okay.
But thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is there any other public comment? No, so we'll go to item 3, committee business. Is there any committee business anybody would like to bring up before we go through our agenda? Okay, we'll go to item A, and I might make a comment before we go to item A. This is a pretty important land use meeting because all council members are here present, so you don't see that all the time. So thank you all for being here. Item A is approval of the minutes of the March 4th, 2024 land use meeting.
Mr. Chair, I move approval of the minutes March 4th, 2024, as was submitted.
I second the motion.
And it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Now we'll go to item B, which is street light infill award and approval.
Yes, sir. Good evening. Kathy Davis, Senior
Yep.
Traffic Engineer for the Streetlight Project once again. I'm hoping to award the project this time. As you're aware, this was the ARPA funding that was approved by the council back in October 2022, $2.15 million, trying to get through some of the requests we've had from the residents over the years. So we did have 3 bids that were opened on March 19th. The lowest responsible bidder was Active Construction. Here's a quick map. We'll go over the locations in more detail, what we'd like to award. So we'd like to do Schedule A and Schedule B. Schedule A consists of kind of the southwest area of the city. And that's Hoyt Road from 340th to 320th, skipping the areas that already have lighting, obviously. There's a short section of 314th Place, just off of the new roundabout, if you will, at 47th and Dash Point Road. Also Dash Point Road, 53rd to 48th Place, and then a section of 7th Way from Campus Drive up to 4th Avenue Southwest. Schedule B, down toward the south end of the city. A couple areas on 359th Street, one just off of Highway 99, and a couple lights between 14th Place and 16th Avenue. Then down to South 373rd. We'll go about 1,500 feet east of SR 99, all the way to where it changes names to 372nd Way, up 372nd Way to kind of the curves at 12th Avenue South. We'll skip that straight section in between and then pick up again at 364th, 11th Place we'll go up to the end of the existing lighting up at Todd Beamer High School. So here is the map again, just to keep you oriented. Project budget, sounds like there might be some questions on this. We did do this in-house, so managed to keep the design costs to a bare minimum. No right-of-way for this one. Construction came in with the bids at $1.7 million and some change. We do have kind of the city standard contingency in there. We're at about 10%, just for unforeseen things that may happen along the way. Hoping to pick up some of that with more lights if we don't need it. And that's always the option. That's about $180,000. And then, of course, our construction management and inspection costs about $250,000. So that puts us a little bit above what was previously authorized. We're at $2.17 million. We were hoping to pick up, with your approval, an extra $20,000 from other ARPA projects that may have a little left over, and I think we'll hear more about that later this evening. But that would get us to our $2.17 million total. Project schedule, obviously we're hoping to award very soon. Construction would begin in summer or sooner if we can make that happen. Completion by August of 2025. Biggest reason for that is materials procurement. We've had a lot of trouble. Service cabinets are about 6 months out. Luminaire poles 2 to 6 months, depending how we hit the demand at the factories. So the options considered. Get this little box out of the way if we can. Usual options: approve the proposed award of the streetlight infill to the lowest responsible bidder, Active Construction. That would be the bid amount of $1.7 million plus a contingency of around $180,000 for a total amount of $1.9 million, Schedules A and B. And that would include authorizing an additional $20,000 in ARPA funding to be transferred and authorize the mayor to execute the contract. Or, of course, do not approve, and we can talk some more about other options. Mayor recommends option 1. Now your turn. What questions may I answer for you?
Councilmember Honda?
Thank you. Thanks for being here. So with the additional $20,000 that you'd like from the ARPA funding, if you did not use the contingency funding, then the 20,000 could be returned to ARPA and we could find another use for it?
I believe so, Mr.
Is
Walsh?
that the plan?
Yeah, so right now, we are 20,000 short to be able to award Schedule A and B. So if the funding is not transferred, effectively, we would only award Schedule A within the current project budget. So yes, certainly, we always try and come in under budget. You're going to hear about the Target demolition project coming in 58,000 under budget in a little bit here. So any contingency money would roll back in to be available for council to reassign at a future date. And obviously, that would be the goal, to bring it in under budget, but we have to have the budget to be able to award both schedules.
Okay. And do you start construction with Schedule A or Schedule B or both?
Could be basically the contractor's choice, whatever they think is more efficient for them. We have called out in the contract that they can only be at 2 locations at one time, just due to our inspector coverage. That way we can make sure we keep an eye on them, make sure everything gets done correctly.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am?
So I have a couple questions. Is it only 2 locations that you just brought up because we don't have the people to oversee it? Or would we be able to get more done faster if we let them do 3 or 4 at a time?
So my understanding and direction from our engineering manager was, yes, we're a little short on people and long on projects this summer. So 2 locations is about the maximum we'd be able to have them out there at a time. And that can help them be more efficient because they don't have equipment spread all over the place. They can plan their work a little better to work on other jobs. But yes, it's possible it'd be more efficient for another tactic.
But does the ARPA money, if we agree to the other 20,000 and this doesn't get done until 2025, does that in conflict? I'm looking at the schedule and it's not.
No,
Don't we have to
no, so
spend by a
that's,
day?
so the 2 locations is the way it was bid. That's what the contractor is planning to do as of right now. So I mean, really, this conversation would be to accelerate it, would be to put more money into inspection beyond that to try and accelerate it. We would have to have a contract or a conversation with the construction company if that was something they were even feasible to do, because they bid this assuming they could only work in 2 locations at once, which is typically 2 crews. So assigning additional crews to them is, a question we'd have to ask if that's even feasible.
That wasn't my question.
Okay, I'm sorry I missed
may
it
have
then.
misstated it. My question was, ARPA funds have to be spent by a certain day,
Correct,
and this project runs into 2025.
correct,
Are we still under the day of when we have to spend them by?
yes,
Okay.
by a year. So we have to have it fully spent about a year after this. We have to have it allocated prior to this project being completed. But yes, we are within the ARPA guidelines, and we've been working with finance, and Steve Groom's been involved in all these conversations as well.
And if we do have, my last question is, if we do have, if we allocate the extra 20,000, which could go to something else but then we would only be able to do 1 set of lighting, we would get it back. We would know before we get it back and we can reallocate it for something else from the contingency.
Yes, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And with that, there would be time after we know if it's coming back, there would still be time to reallocate it and get it spent within the ARPA guidelines.
Yes, this is fully compliant with all the ARPA guidelines, and if there's savings, it can roll, is what Director Groom told me.
Okay.
So that is all correct. Or council could say, hey, we want to go pick off another couple of lights if there's money left in the money left in the contingency. We could award a couple additional lights effectively off Schedule C, but that would be a future conversation.
But when is the end date for ARPA funds to have to be?
It's
26.
to be allocated is the end of 2024. To be spent is in 2026. I don't remember the exact date in 2026.
Okay.
But
All right. So if we we would know whether there was any excess before the end of 2024, so it could be reallocated?
So this funding would be allocated. We would meet the requirements by having it in this project. And then if it's unspent, we could still move it to another project. But the requirement is to have it allocated by the end of 2024, and this would accomplish that.
Okay, so you can reallocate after the end of
That's
2024?
correct, as long as you,
Okay.
as long as you still spend it by the 2026 deadline.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. So once you start working, are you going to continue to work through the winter until all of the lights are in? Or do you take the winter off?
It will depend on the materials. So what we've asked for in the contract is to have all the underground work done by Halloween this year. So that's conduit, foundations, that sort of thing. We're anticipating there might be some break for just letting the materials arrive. But all that above-ground work can certainly be done during the winter if the materials show up.
So you'll do all the underground work for all Section A and all Section B before Halloween?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, do I have a motion?
I move to forward the proposed option 1 to the April 16, 2024 consent agenda for approval.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item C. This is fiber optic loop, South 317th Street to South 272nd Street, approval and to award.
All right. Hello, I'm John Strong, engineer. This is for the fiber optic loop, approval to award. We got one bid on March 1st, and that bid was the lowest responsible bidder, and it was Cannon Construction LLC. Here's a map of what, where we're going with the fiber optic loop. Basically comes from all the way to our north border, down Star Lake, down Military, and it follows all the way down to 26th Ave and connects to our other fiber down Pack Highway. Our project budget was 2.6 million from sound transit mitigation. Our estimated expenditures is also 2.6 million. The contract was 1.7 million. Our two options are to award the fiber optic loop project to Cannon Construction LLC in the amount of $1.72 million and approve the contingency of $430,000 for a maximum contract amount of $2,150,162.98. Second option is reject the bid and approve us with, or provide direction for us. The mayor recommends option 1. Questions?
Councilmember?
Quick question. You mentioned you only had one bid come in.
Yep.
Is that pretty standard for this kind of project, or is it just, that seems kind of,
I'm unsure if it's standard for this type of project or not.
So this is a little bit of an atypical project for a city to take on, to put in this much fiber in one push. Canon is certainly a well-regarded company that's done work with the city before. I don't think it's completely atypical to have one bid for this type of work, but I mean, certainly we've been seeing more like 3 to 7 on most projects. There's a fair amount of fiber work going on with CenturyLink and Comcast specifically in the region right now. So most of the contractors that do this work are fairly tied up. So this basically did meet the engineer's estimate. So we got a fair price to do the work.
even though there's no comparables, the price is kind of what you guys had budgeted or within?
Correct. And we still, our team did put together an engineer's estimate before it went out to bid, and it's comparable to that. So, I mean, that's what we usually run it against anyway, not just compare it to the bids that we received to make sure that all of the bids aren't out of whack one way or the other compared to what we were anticipating the project to be. And everything with that checks out. So I don't have any reservations about this contractor doing this work.
Okay, thank you.
I do have one question, which kind of goes back to the one we just had about streetlights. If we have a contingency and we don't use it, and this is sound transit money, how does that get reused, or where does it go?
So this Yeah, this one's a little bit different. So this project is technically a mitigation project. So this was Sound Transit was obligated under the development agreement or the original development agreement to build this under their guideway. They came back after the development agreement was executed and said, hey, we don't really want this within the limited access right of way of the track. We would rather pay the city to build this on our behalf in the city-owned right of way. As part of the amended development agreement that came before council 2018, 2019 ballpark timeframe, that changed the station area. This was one of the changes that was also reviewed and approved by council to allow them to pay it. So with that all being said, since this was a mitigation payment, they paid us to perform the work. So the risk, if it comes in over or under budget, is the city's. So if we bring this in under budget, that funding will revert into the unallocated fund within the transportation CIP and be available for other transportation projects. But it will not go back to Sound Transit.
Okay. Thank you. Seeing no other questions, do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to forward the award of the fiber optic loops South 317th Street to South 272nd Street project to the April 16, 2024 consent agenda for approval.
And second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
All right.
Oops. Former Target Building demolition project acceptance.
Yep, and that's me again.
You get to
so-
do it again?
Yeah,
All
it's me
right.
again. All right, so this is for the project acceptance of the Target building. Here's your little before and after. Here's the ugly looking Target building, and there we go. That's it. So the authorized contract amount was $373,000, about $800. We had a contingency of $56,000 for a total of $430,000. Our final contract amount was $371,144.80, which remains with $58,713.13. So our question is should the council accept the former Target building demolition by Swafford Excavating LLC as complete and approve the final acceptance of the former Target building demolition, or don't accept it and provide us for direction? The mayor recommends option one. Question?
I guess I have one more question. Didn't we use ARPA money on this? So this comes back into our ARPA account,
Correct.
the 58,000?
That's correct.
Could I ask a question?
Yes, Councilmember Honda?
So the 58,000, is that included in the total that Steve Groom gave today for how much ARPA money is left?
I don't believe so. I didn't talk to him after that email. He was not counting this because this hasn't been before council yet to bring that back in. My understanding is that was limited to the salary saving conversation, is the email that he sent today.
Okay,
But I would need to confirm that, but that's my understanding.
thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Walsh?
I was just going to make a motion.
Okay, go
I have a
report.
question.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
sorry, I didn't see the blue light there. Lydia, your turn.
All right, one sec. So the 58,000, what was my question?
I don't know, you didn't ask me.
Oh, do we have to wait until the project is completed? Because sometimes there's that contingency or whatever where we spend more than we thought we were going to spend?
No, that's what is before council tonight is final acceptance to close the project. So this would transfer back in as part of the next budget adjustment technically.
Okay, thank you.
I have one more question. When we did this project, we took ARPA money to take the building down. When the property sells eventually, then that 300 and the other money will come back to ARPA? If we get to the point where we finish the arrangement with Trent, they're gonna write us a check for some money,
Correct.
and we're gonna get the ARPA money back to reallocate?
So that is not the intent of when it was approved. That would
That
be
has nothing to do with this. This is a question I'm asking.
correct. So I would ask that question go to FedRec and the finance director. I think technically that's an option. I do not think that was the intent though.
I always thought it was coming back to do something else with it. Maybe I'm the only one that thinks that way, but,
Chair, I don't think that that's how the DA is set up either, to effectuate that. So I think the answer is no, at least at the moment.
okay. Well, we can have that discussion later, right? What?
Isn't it tomorrow?
Yes.
Well, yeah, tomorrow we have the land, the deal with Trent, but we can always have the discussion of how the money gets spread out, right?
Yeah, I mean, if I understand your question correctly, you're saying we're going to receive a payment from Trent, and could we effectively reimburse back into the ARPA fund the contract amount for this
Yeah, that's
contract
my
to
understanding
reallocate
of
it?
I thought the spirit of the agreement was when we did target.
Okay, I will have to check with Director Groom on that one. I do not, that was not my understanding. My understanding was we were using ARPA money to pay for the demolition, and then the sales price would basically go into unrestricted revenue.
Go into the ether somewhere, right?
Well,
That's some other need.
correct.
Yeah, I don't think it was certainly not enumerated in the developer extension agreement, and I think it's just a developer agreement, and I think it's just I mean, you can ask for it and see what everybody says, but I don't think that's.
We direct where the
planned.
money goes.
Yeah. It seems like it'd be less encumbered if it didn't go back into
ARPA,
ARPA.
spend it a second time.
Correct.
So,
Okay. Okay.
All right,
I got
okay.
this. Okay, do we have a motion?
Yeah, I move to forward the final acceptance of the former Target Building demolition project, the April 16, 2024 consent agenda for approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go to authorization to apply for transportation grants. Mr. Perez.
Okay, good evening. And, let's see, I need to do this. There we go. All right, so, let's see, where are we going now? So the policy question is, should the council authorize the mayor to submit transportation grant applications? So it's time for the semi-annual call for projects from Puget Sound Regional Council. They are due April 29th. And in reviewing the grant funding criteria, we've suggested 3 projects to apply for. And the first one, this doesn't show up that good, but Pacific Highway Non-Motorized Trail. So we currently have the project that would construct a trail all the way from 308th up to 288th along 16th Avenue. This would continue that up to 272nd. And one segment in particular is going down the hill on 16th from 288th to 284th. That will probably be pretty much a complete street reconstruction to make that happen. And it addresses traffic calming concerns as well as complaints about lack of sidewalk for the kids getting on school buses. So we are proposing to apply for design money for $800,000 is what we're estimating the cost at, and we would be applying for $600,000. The other segments would be actually a trail going up the hill on 279th Street from 15th to Pack Highway, and then short stretch along Pack Highway, and then up 16th Avenue South. So the reason there's a segment in between is that's just a local residential street on 15th, and so it's benign enough for most users. The second project would be BPA Trail Extension. This would be to acquire the right-of-way along 324th from 11th Place and Celebration Park to 23rd, and then up 23rd to the transit facility. We're estimating that cost at $2 million and suggesting applying for grant of $1.6 million. And finally, preservation project on South 320th between Pack Highway and I-5. And that is estimated at $2.3 million, and we would be requesting a grant of $1.15. with a similar city match from the overlay funds. So with that, options considered was to approve the proposed submittal of these grant applications, or two, do not approve the submittal and provide direction to staff. Mayor's recommendation is to approve the submittals. And
Councilmember McDaniel?
A couple questions. For the grants, are these grants going into the grant library we've been hearing about, as knowing that, that those are the grants that are out there to get? And also, did you, or the grant company that we're working with, are they going to be helping you with these grants in the future, or is this your knowledge base and you stick with it?
this is all city staff resources in applying these grants. So we aren't using outside consultants for it. When we get the project selected, we'll be using consultants to help design and deliver the projects. But for right now, if I understood your question correctly, it's staff is putting together the applications.
All right.
I think, Councilmember McDaniel, that you're confusing our presentation from economic development about a grant writer that we brought
Yeah, but I
on,
thought Economic Development told me they
which
were
has
doing.
nothing to do with this.
Yeah, but I thought Economic Development was telling me they were going to be helping all grants. So I was just curious if this was going into the library or not.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Whoever she is.
Council President
Yeah,
Conrad.
her.
Over there.
Hey, thank you, Chair. Just to mention that this is really money that's going to the Puget Sound Regional Council, which is the governing body for the federal grants, federal money that gets allocated to the cities, which has always driven me crazy because they get to decide what everybody gets, and they kind of direct the money toward where they think it should go, like non-motorized. You can only apply for non-motorized.
And preservation for the overlay.
That aside,
Yes.
what are our chances of getting any money out of the PSRC?
So we've been tracking pretty well. Actually, Deputy Director Winkler has been pretty good at playing the grant funding game with PSRC. We've had darn near 100% last couple of go-arounds.
Okay.
So
So we might get one of three or all three of three?
I think we might get all three.
Yeah, oh, okay. That's probably pitiful little compared to what some of the other cities get, but my opinion. But thank you. I used to sit on the PSRC board, yeah.
Right, and yeah, so there is a staff committee on the regional
Yeah.
project evaluation
Yeah.
committee. We do have some influence there.
Yeah, well, let me just thank you for letting me complain.
Councilmember Walsh?
Okay, so just to put it in concrete terms, for example, the 320th project from Pack Highway to the freeway?
Yes.
Okay, so we get that funding. What actually does it do? I mean, how would it look after that money is spent different than what it looks like now?
Well, it's pavement preservation and replacement, really.
Oh, it's pavement preservation?
Yes,
Okay.
that one is. So it'd just be an overlay project for
Okay.
the most part, and then any upgrades associated with that for meeting ADA requirements is like 95% of the work there.
Okay, so the other two are some
They're-
physical changes. This one is just, okay, all right, gotcha.
Pavement maintenance.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Honda?
Thank you. So the 320th grant, with all the work that Sound Transit is doing there, the work that we will potentially be doing there, why would we want to have this done now instead of after that work is done?
So this is for 27 and 28. So we're a few years out. Sound Transit should be done with their work by then. I hope.
Okay. And I would say, I thought I understood our grant writing policy to be working with all departments, including Public Works. So
Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
she listed the departments she was working with, and
Okay.
Public Works was one of them. So
Okay.
anyway, for your, in case you need help, I guess. I don't know.
Okay, could you go back 3 slides? I guess one more. It looks to me like you got a math error there. It says 2 million and 1.6 and 200,000.
Yeah, the match is 400, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
missed that edit.
Okay. And then these matches, 400, the 200, and the 1.1. The 1.1 we would overlay anyway, probably.
Right.
Are these tend to come out of the general budget, or are they going to come out of non-existent REIT, or
Well,
what's a projection, or where we have to budget for these, correct?
my understanding is, yes, we would have the budget for these between MVET, REIT, and traffic impact fee funds
Okay.
that we'd be able to match. And these are relatively small matches for these.
Right.
So, not that it's chump change, but
It's a great leverage of the money. I mean,
exactly.
it's tremendously good leverage. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Jerry caught the number, but I do have another question. So I noticed that some of the project require 50% city match, some less.
Yes.
How is that determined?
Well, it's usually by the grant funding agency. So with federal, depending on which program, it could be, we need to be at least 13.5% grant match. Others are 10. Others, the way, if it comes through WashDOT, a lot of times they'll say you need to provide 10% of the design funds, and if you obligate construction funds within a certain period of time, then there's no match required for the construction. That's how we're handling the 27th Avenue Southwest and 344th project. So that's really leveraging the money there.
Okay, got it, thank you.
Okay. Seeing no more questions, is there a motion?
I move to forward the proposed submittal of transportation grant application to the April 16, 2024 consent agenda for approval.
I second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, it passes 3-0. Thank you very much, Mr. Perez. Okay, we're going to go to G, Washington State Department of Commerce Planning Grant and Interagency Agreement.
Actually, we've got another one.
Oh, where'd I go? I missed the, accept the transportation grant and authorize to execute the associated agreements. This is where we get money, right?
This is one where we get money, yes.
Okay, well, let's not skip that one.
Okay. Okay.
We'll move that to the back burner.
So,
Go ahead.
let's see, why is this not going? Oh, that's it. Okay. And I wish this would go away. Dang it. I can't see it. Drag that out of the way so I can see what I'm doing. There we go. There we go. Okay. I will move this down. Okay, so the question is, should the council authorize acceptance of transportation grant funding? So last month, council authorized a grant application for Highway 99 at Federal Way High School pedestrian improvements, and this application was successful. So this, using the Transportation Improvement Board Early Opportunity Complete Streets Grant of state money, we estimated the total project at $151,000. The grant will be providing $120,800, and for a city match of $30,200. So what this does is upgrade signing and striping in the area, increase street lighting, and provide some median fencing to discourage mid-block pedestrian crossings, especially given that opposite the high school, there proposed to be a group of food trucks being developed in that area, and so we're concerned that that's going to be a whole lot of mid-block crossings that would be encouraged by that attractiveness to students. So as you may recall, we've already done some traffic signal modifications at this intersection, and so this would help us fund the remaining project elements. So, options considered is 1, to approve, to accept the transportation grant funding, authorize the mayor to execute related agreements, or 2, do not approve and provide direction to staff. And the mayor's recommendation is to accept that transportation grant funding.
Councilmember Honda?
Thank you. So this is improvements that this city will be making at the intersection where the kids have been hit.
Yes, at 308th and Highway, Pack Highway.
Is the school district doing anything on their
The school
side?
district is providing some flags.
Yes, they're there.
Yes, and they've done some education awareness internally with the city, or with the students, I mean. There's a couple other things they were proposing to do, and I'm blanking on those right now. Maybe EJ remembers.
Yeah, so they've made a number of education outreach programs that they're doing internally with students or teachers. They're also working on signage language to post next to the Metro bus stops that we're working in partnership with them, that they're developing the signage. That's all focused around basically crossing the crosswalk when it's safe to do so, put your phone down type of message. So they're doing that as well. They are not funding improvements within the right-of-way, though, to answer your question directly. That falls on the city's shoulders.
Is the speed limit being reduced?
As of right now, the answer is no. So we've been looking at that. We've talked to WashDOT a couple of times. That's still under discussion, but that's not part of this.
Has the city met with the students to tell them that this is, the decision is what is going to be done?
Yes, we've met with the students. I'm sorry, I missed the last part of your question.
What is going to be done?
Yes.
I talked with the kids a couple weeks ago, and they were wondering exactly what was being done, so.
Yes, that's all occurred, and city staff has met with them. We've also relied on the district staff to meet with them more frequently than we've been meeting with them. So
Okay.
they've been kept in the loop on that. Obviously, we haven't committed to doing work that council has yet to approve, but they know these are items under discussion as well.
So are we going to still try to reduce the speed limit in front of the school?
So that's an ongoing conversation with WashDOT. I don't really have information on that for tonight. That's a separate conversation than what we're here for.
Okay,
One
thank
of
you.
the things we're proposing to do is provide some advisory speed zones. So with the flashing yellow flashers, similar to what we have in front of the Federal Way Academy, they are not statutory, so they can't be enforced. It's more of a consciousness raising exercise. So we're proposing that during those near bell times that would be an advisory speed of 30.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no other questions, do I have a motion? Mr. Walsh?
I move to forward option 1 to the April 16, 2024 consent agenda for approval.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say
Aye.
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 Thank you very much. Now we will go to the Washington State Department of Commerce Planning Grant and Interagency Agreement.
Good
Mr.
evening,
Pelley.
council. Okay. I do not have a presentation pulled up for this, but I can go ahead and give it to you. This is should the council approve the $107,400 grant from Washington State Department of Commerce to develop Federal Waste Hazard Mitigation Plan. Last November, the council did approve us to apply for the grant, and this winter we were approved, and it's come back to us now. This, to remind the council, this grant is for our hazard mitigation plan, and this is a climate planning grant from the Washington Department of Commerce, supports development of our hazard mitigation plan. We intend to develop this and adopt it by 2025 as an annex to the King County Regional Plan. And this is in cooperation with King County. They are redeveloping their hazard mitigation at this time. We are jumping on that to become an annex of that. And this funding authorizes us to spend on any contractors or reimburse city employees for our time spent with this hazard mitigation plan. It'll then be part of an annex to the climate and resiliency chapter of the master plan. So this is not, there is no local match required for this. This is simply a grant that is given to us to reimburse us for spending on climate resiliency in our hazard mitigation plan. Option 1 is recommended by the mayor to move this to the April 16th consent agenda for approval. As a caveat to this, we were working with the Department of Commerce to hold off on approval until after the April 16th council. However, someone at the Department of Commerce sent this to the mayor, and the mayor, he signed it. So he has already signed it. So with your, with the council's approval, we request that you approve this and move this to the council. If you do not, we can have the signature stricken and move back to Commerce and ask them to send it to us again after this council. I apologize for the confusion, and please, and I ask for the council's patience on this issue.
Council President Coachman?
Well, hey, I don't have a problem with them paying us to do work for them. Great. I just don't know what we're going to put into their plan for climate resiliency in Federal Washington. I'm just curious.
So part of that we can say right now is sea level rise at Dumas Bay and along our miles of coastline.
Interesting.
That's one
Yeah,
thing.
we do have
Another is the increase in severe storms, and that's going to increase drainage and increase landslides and erosion. So looking at how we, and how as the city zones in the future, as the rate of erosion is going to increase. Also, flooding is another thing that we have to watch out for. With these severe storms are going to come more flooding, more drainage, more sewer problems.
Interesting.
And I could go on and on.
I
Councilman.
agree with you. We do have that problem. They can't get flood insurance because they're in a flood zone.
Correct.
Yeah, no, I agree with that totally. No, if we can get money out of the Department of Commerce, which seems to have a lot of money, right? Because we went to visit them in D.C. Good, go for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, Council?
Yes, Councilmember Lydia?
Yes, thank you so much. So is there a timeline for the deliverables that you have listed?
It is. By June of 2025, we will have the hazard mitigation plan and ready to implement it as an annex to the master plan.
Okay. And the 107,000, it's not reimbursable, they're gonna give us money. Is it upfront or is it like quarterly, annually? How do they determine?
It is reimbursable, but does not require us to do an upfront matching cost.
Okay. And how often that?
I'm not, I can get back to you on the timeline. I don't remember the timeline. I don't know if I can have a lifeline.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening, City Council. Keith Niven, Community Development Director. So the way those commerce grants work is generally there's an amount that's been approved through the contract, which apparently the mayor already signed. And then what happens is as we document our costs, so if our costs are either hiring experts or putting staff time in, we can send those invoices to Commerce and then they pay them. So we can do that as frequently as we want up until we get to the point where we've reached the contract cap.
And they have to pay those amounts within 30 days of us submitting them the invoice.
Okay, so as long as by the end of the contract term, before 2025 then?
June of 2025, correct.
Okay, thank you.
So basically, staff is just tracking their hours, and then,
That's it. And if we contract with someone for part of that hazard mitigation program, you've got a lot of different parts and steps along the way, and I'll be leading that.
okay. All right.
Yeah,
I'll-
Councilmember Walsh?
Motion?
You have another
You want me to
question?
make a motion?
I'll make this motion.
You got this one.
Okay.
Okay. I move to keep the mayor out of trouble and forward the climate planning grant and associated interagency agreement with the Washington State Department of Commerce to the April 16, 2024 council consent agenda for approval.
I like the money, so
Yeah.
we'll forgive him. I'll second the motion.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. Now we get to move to the joint use operation and maintenance facility, 85% design report and authorization to bid. We're gonna need a lot of $107,000 to add this one up.
Yes.
No.
You're correct. Good evening, Chair Dovey and Council. My name's EJ Walsh, Public Works Director. Desiree is on vacation with her kids this week, so I'm here presenting this to you. So previously, we were here for the 35% design or 30% design and authorization to move it to 85%. Between those two milestones, most of what we've been doing is pulling together all of the bid specs, the actual construction documents, and the back-end work, coordinating with the utilities. So the drawings and plans you're going to see tonight are not that different than what you saw at the last presentation, but there has been a lot of the back-end work to actually get this ready to go out to bid. If this advances. So the policy question is, should City Council authorize staff to proceed with bidding of the Joint Operations and Maintenance Facility and return to Land Use and Transportation Committee and Council for authorization to award? So the background information behind this, March of 2023 was the final site selection, which was referred to in the report as Site 1, which is expanding the existing facility to the north, was approved by Council. We have gone through the authorization to purchase the additional properties. I'm happy to report that all of them have been acquired. We are now the proud owners of all of those parcels. We have been working on abating multiple different parts of that process, both picking up trash and debris that was left on the properties, as well as we had a third-party testing company came out. This came before Council previously to deal with the asbestos. There was asbestos found in, I believe we're up to 9 of the homes. So we're in the process currently of that being abated. That is well underway. 3 of the houses were completed last week. 1 of the houses should be completed this week, and the rest will carry on after those. So that process is moving ahead as well. We've also been working with Lake Haven and PSE to cap and remove all the utilities that served those houses previously. And on the design side, the progress has actually, we're slightly over 85%. We're closer to 92% of the design of both the on-site and the frontage improvements. So the frontage improvements is actually the next item on the agenda. And on the permitting side, everything is in for the permits. Everything's been submitted. Nothing is approved to date, but everything has been submitted to the respective city and third-party, Lake Haven and PSE and all the other agencies that receive them. So this, on the site layout, there have been no notable changes since the 30% design. There's been some operational efficiency conversations, specifically around the water system with Lake Haven. So Lake Haven came back with a number of comments to make the construction more efficient and to reduce some of the amount of piping required. So we've incorporated that work. But that's not anything that any of us will be able to see once the site is built. On the budget, the numbers portion of this is largely the same as the last time we presented it to Council. And we are still showing a difference between the current funded approved budget and the current assumed expenditures. However, we'll cover that a little bit more on the next slide as well. So the base program, as approved right now, is $34 million. The fleet and fueling add is $5 million. The SWAT vehicle storage is $350,000, and then the property acquisition is that last $8 million to get to a funding budgeted proposal of $47,350,000. On the expenditure side, the cost estimate that the architect has provided to us shows a construction value of $37 million. The fueling is $5.9 million, and that includes all of the fleet and then a pro rata share of the design costs. The SWAT building is coming in higher than what was previously allocated, and that difference is $4.5 million. I will caveat that there are multiple contingencies within this, and that's actually what we're going to cover on this page. So that includes a construction contingency of 15%, so 4.7 million. When we go to construction, we actually typically carry a 10% contingency. So right now, this is still shown as 5% high. We have a design and professional fee at 15%. We're tracking that to be more like 6% in actuality. So there's an extra $2 to $2.5 million in that one line in and of itself. Permits and utility fees are allocated at 4% or 1.2 million. That number is also substantially high compared to the actual permit costs. Lake Haven and the fire department have been good to work with. And FF&E is the last line. We are similar to many of the conversations that I know some of the current council members were involved with the PAC. We are trying to protect that line as much as possible. That way we don't get to the end of the project and say, okay, now where do we buy tables? So that is the budget from the architect. I will point out that also includes the tools for fleet for servicing, so that number is not office furniture. It is mostly equipment. But when you add all of this together on a $34 million project, you get about $12 million of contingencies. So there have been a couple of changes that we incorporated that did not adjust the overarching budget. So in the site selection and going out and looking at additional sites, we encountered a year in delay in the construction schedule. This project was supposed to be being started construction last summer. With that year of delay, we did not adjust the project budget by CPI or the fact that we've seen construction materials increase between 12 and 20%. So the SWAT facility, the original number, and you saw that delta of about $180,000. The original was a garage for them to put the Bearcat in, the armored vehicle that they use, and that has grown to the number that you saw. And again, that budget has not changed. And then lastly, and this one, it's about $1 million delta, is the increase in perimeter security along 28th Avenue South. So specifically after the large break-in that we had, we were, after conversation with council and the mayor, we were asked to relook at that and increase the security. So that went from being a hardened chain link fence to a physical concrete wall at the suggestion of our architect to change out, and then that is also what's proposed to be used as a art project in its ultimate fashion as well. But again, that's another cost increase that we did not change the budget for. Timeline-wise, here's where we are. So this is the amended timeline that we prepared when the site was actually selected as Site 1. So this does reflect that delay in the project schedule. So within that schedule and this was the schedule from that we put together the beginning of 2023, we are on schedule as far as that current schedule goes from the decision to move ahead with Site 1. And this does show a groundbreaking this summer. So the options before council is to authorize staff to proceed with bidding of the Joint Operations and Maintenance Facility and return to Land Use and Transportation Committee and Council for authorization to award, or 2, do not authorize staff to proceed with this project and to provide direction to staff. The mayor recommends option 1. The last thing I'm going to, which I don't think we actually have a slide in here for, to bring up though is Director Groom is working on pulling together the finance package for this as well that matches out to the project budget that is slated to go to FedRec this summer. The budgets have all been approved already. That is the actual let of a bond and the timing that Director Groom wants to discuss as part of that. So that will coincide with the bid award, that those two decisions will happen simultaneously. The conversation. Right now, the initial construction and basically the land clearing heavy earthwork is proposed to continue to be funded. There's a fair amount of funding remaining on the interfund loan that council previously approved. So right now, the thought pattern is to delay going out for bonds as long as possible, just based on market trends and what Director Groom is seeing on interest rates, and basically just playing cards in our favor in that conversation. And since we do have that interfund loan that's available, basically using that to get to the opportune point to bond. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Council President Gottschalk?
I noticed that construction went through December. Do you anticipate it'll be done in December?
Construction continues on the next page through December of 2025. We are, I am hopeful that we can get this done in the fall of 2025, but some of that's going to depend on the contractor that comes in and successfully bids it. That's one of the conversations our architect has been having with us, is how can we actually weight the timeline of the bidding and basically award additional points towards a contractor when we're looking at the respective responding contractors, and account for timeline savings. That's a little bit larger conversation, and keeping that within the context of the lowest available responsive bidder that we're having.
Thank you.
Lydia?
Yeah, with the SWAT vehicle storage, and I'm assuming that's the police department?
Correct.
Right? So would they be able to find funds for that from DOJ or wherever to cover that cost?
So that is the plan, yes. So it's, and the reason that I bring it up is not the dollars related to it as much as the context that we have increased that, and it is not reflective of we did not increase the budget to match the conversation. But yes, that would be, the plan as of now anyway, is that would be paid out of effectively state and federal seizure funding.
Thank you.
Councilmember Honda?
Thank you. So when the council approved to put this in the budget at 34 million, and now we're at over 51 million, are there any cost savings that we could potentially see at this point, or do we expect this cost will go up?
So the construction budget of 34 million is in there. The land value acquisition is in there as 8 million. So the combined is actually 42 that's in the budget right now. But as of right now, we are doing everything we can to push it down. I mean, the way the construction marketing is trending right now, every day we delay putting this out, the costs go up. So, I mean, right now, my advice is we get this out on the street as soon as possible and be able to look at actual numbers from a contractor and have a conversation. Once we have those numbers, the contractors are locked in at that price. We have value engineered this project to the point that there's not really anything that can be cut at this point and still have an operational project.
So these are not actual numbers, these are numbers that we're estimating at our best ability?
So we have, for this project with the size of it, which is the same, I mean, to be fair, the same way we estimated the Performing Arts Center and the same way the Community Center was estimated, we have brought in a third-party cost estimator that does cost estimating. That's what their business is. And they have been preparing the numbers, and that they are the ones that have given us these budget, or the design numbers that are included in this presentation.
One of the things when we built the PAC was that FF&E, we did not get all of that covered.
Correct.
So is it possible that you guys will be able to use existing furniture?
So that
And use as much as you can without having to buy new stuff?
That is absolutely the plan. So most of the FF&E is actually equipment. It's not office furniture. It is equipment, namely for fleet. But that number that you're seeing is namely, it's a tire changer, it is tools, it is welders, it is a tire rack, it is the oil changing equipment, things like that. It's a lift. There's a long list of equipment like that that the city does not own today, and that is what's in that FF&E list. There is a nominal amount of office furniture in there, but that's pennies compared to the total value.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember McDaniel?
Yeah, so this is the FF&Es you're talking about for tools. They don't exist. This is when we're taking in-house and doing some mechanical stuff ourselves.
Correct.
So that's part of it. You had mentioned 12 million that's contingent or is in flex. Is it, okay, construction, 15. When will we actually know the real numbers on some of this stuff? I mean, we go out for bid, but the out for bid does it include this or not? It's only for construction, isn't it?
It's for construction, but the contingency is based on, typically, as a city, what we do is it's 10% of the awarded bid value. So when we have an actual bid number, that contingency right now is 15%, so we will drop it to 10% of the award. So if it's, for argument's sake, if it comes in at 34 million for the bid, just for conversation's sake, we would drop that from 4.7 to 3.4.
Gotcha. And if it comes in at 51, it goes to 5.1.
Yeah, right, so it's only the construction contract, so it would,
Okay.
it's not gonna go up.
Not the whole thing?
Correct.
Okay.
It's not gonna go up, so, I mean, even if we saw a $40 million bid, it would be 4, and it would be 700,000, but it's,
Gotcha. And then one of the things you mentioned is $1 million, and one of the costs was the upgrading of the security system, or the fencing and stuff. If I understand correctly, are you saying it's going to be a cement wall, concrete wall down that road then?
correct.
So it's going to be a big gray wall?
No, so it's got variation, it meets all of our architectural guidelines, it's actually in the right of way. It will look like a retaining wall from the outside, effectively, with steps and modulation, is the way it's designed right now.
Okay. And then, for the sounds that you guys are saying, what you're presenting to us has included whatever cut you guys felt was possible?
That's correct.
Okay. That's it for now. Thank you.
Councilmember Walsh?
Right. So you had the property acquisition of 8 million. Is that what it actually came in at, the very same that,
So-
or we
so
over,
we are-
under, what?
We are working on closing out all the move expenses that we had. We're actually tracking that to be about 7,576. So it came in under budget, but we are still waiting on expenses from one property that had 5 houses. That was a commercial relocation. So we are waiting on the invoices from the moving companies for that, and then we can close that out. But that is trending to be about 500,000 to 600,000 under budget.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, seeing none, do we have a motion?
Chair Rovey, I move to forward option 1 to the April 16, 2024 consent agenda for approval.
Second the motion?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All sorts of windows showing up. So the joint operations and maintenance facility frontage improvements. So as part of any development, the city requires frontage improvements to be constructed along said frontage, and we hold ourselves to the same standards. So we have we talked about this when we selected Site 1. With the length of Site 1 and the shape of it, we have a fair amount of frontage improvements. It's a long stretch between 28th and then down 308th as well. So before you tonight is the 85 design report and authorization to bid. We are proposing that these two projects, the last one and this one, get put out as what's called a linked bid. So they will be bid as two projects with a city optionable link. What that means is if the contractor that is awarded both, if it becomes advantageous to the city, we can award both contracts to one contractor. Or the city has the option to say, no, we're going to unlink the bids and we're going to give one to you and this contract to a second contractor. We are reserving that right, and the bidders will have the option of basically having if we win both, it's this price, and if we don't win both, it's that price conversation, which gives us the most flexibility. Most of the time when you do linked bids, it does go to the same contractor to do everything. But it provides us the best bidding climate that we can get and gives the city the most options to award when we get to that point. So with that all said, the policy question is, should City Council authorize transfer of the capital improvement program transportation funds and bidding of the joint operations and maintenance facility frontage improvement? That's not the right policy question. That was the one from last time. It's should the City Council authorize bidding of the frontage improvements and return to Land Use Council and Land Use and Transportation Committee and Council for bid award? That is the wrong policy question. So as background information, this is all very similar to the last one. With Site 1 being selected, we have advanced the frontage improvements. They are also at 90 to 92% as we sit here today. The frontage improvements include, the most visible thing that the public will see is new sidewalk and streetlights all the way down 28th. in talking, we've had many conversations with the neighbors on the west side of 28th over the last couple of weeks. I can tell you I've personally met, I think, every one of them out on site. They are all hugely in support of this project. They are all very happy that we have gone in and started cleaning up some of the remnants that were left behind. And we've gotten nothing but positive accolades that I've heard. The request has been continuously for a sidewalk on at least one of the two sides of the streets. And I've been happy to say, hey, by city standard, we have to build sidewalks, so guess what? You're gonna get it. And that has been the number one question we get is, hey, if the city's really building this project, are you going to put sidewalk in? So we are also putting in streetlights through this section. Subsurface, we are doing some storm drainage work and some repair to the existing road that's not in overly great shape as well. So what you see on the top is the first section of the profile with widening to account for that sidewalk that we talked about previously. And then what you see on the bottom is the structural repair that we're doing along the roadway as well to bring it up to current standards. This part of the project, I am happy to say, is actually proposed as under budget currently. So the budget right now is a total of 3.35 on the design side of it, and the anticipated estimated cost, which we do have the same cost estimator that's doing the site, is doing the same estimate for this as well. Has it at 3.29, so you can see that's round numbers, $60,000 under budget, or sorry, $40,000 under budget. And it is funded as Project 205 in the Transportation CIP that was identified way back yonder. So we've carried that project number through as part of this project. So the options before council is, and the other part of that is this policy question that I think actually was correct on the first side. So the SWIM funds, SWIM is responsible for 33% of the cost of this improvements. So as part of this, to get to the number, the 3.35, that is what's in the adopted budget, we need to formally transfer the 1.1 million in SWIM funds that is allocated. It's in the SWIM CIP as for this project as well. It's literally in account 304 instead of account 306 within the city. So as part of this project, we do need to move the money into the correct account. So the options before council is to authorize transfer of the capital improvement program transportation funds and bid the joint operations and maintenance facility frontage improvements. And as I mentioned, that would be a linked bid. Return to land use and transportation committee and council for bid award, or option 2, do not authorize staff and provide direction. The mayor recommends option 1. With that, I am happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Honda?
Thank you. So when we talk about the 2% for the arts, we had talked about having the frontage as one big art piece. If these two projects are divided into two, then are you only limited to the 2% for the frontage project if they're not combined?
No. So however we build them, that the art conversation is a completely independent conversation from that. The way the city code works, the 2% for the arts is for the on-site portion. So for the code language within the art section of city code explicitly excludes the cost of the right-of-way improvements. So it will be of that first presentation. So if the bid comes in at 34 million, it'll be of that value. That all being said, the code also requires that the project be concurrent with the project. So if the decision is made to put it further out in the right-of-way, on the wall, wherever, I mean, the wall technically is at the right-of-way line, not in the right-of-way, that is all fair game and a separate conversation than how we award the bids.
So we would not be able to use the 2% for the arts if it's in the right of way?
No, we would.
We would, okay. All right, thank you.
Councilmember McDaniel?
Just a quick one, you mentioned the sidewalks and lights. Is that only going to be for the length of the actual facility itself, or will it extend any farther from that?
So it will go down to the intersection with 312, so it'll extend in front of the existing facility that where there's none today, that's technically outside the boundary of what we would have to do within code. But so I guess to answer your question, yes, it extends beyond that. However, I think if any of us were to go out there and walk the project, we would say, practically speaking, the project goes to the intersection at 312. So I don't think anyone's going to ever say that we effectively built beyond it. As soon as you get in front of the apartments on the south side, there's existing sidewalk there that we're connecting to.
Okay.
So you can't really carry it further to the south. On the north, it stops at 308th Lane, so it will not carry across the intersection, but effectively, we wrap the corner and then go down 308th Lane with the
So it will
improvements.
go the whole way down to the T intersection?
Yes.
Okay, that was my main question. Okay, thank you.
Council President Hofer?
Thank you, Chair. I'm wondering, since both these items, this item and the one before, both say return to land use for decision, but it's going on the 16th agenda for consent agenda. At what point are we going to bring this in business to the public in our agendas? In other words, right now, we're just talking about returning back to land use, but it says we're going to move forward to the option 1 to the April 16th consent agenda.
Correct.
So I'm wondering, at what point do we make this public? Because unless it's on business, consent agenda doesn't go for a discussion.
Sure. So right now, this is going out to bid the project.
Right.
The previous conversation, once we get the bids, we will bring the bids back to council.
And then
To
that would go.
LUCC.
And that would, after that would go
be
on
the
business.
point where, like, council is actually authorizing expenditure of funds and picking a contractor. The previous conversation has always been that would be the part that goes to the council business. I would anticipate that being either May or June, just depending on how quickly the bidding goes.
Okay.
But I mean, certainly if you want the authorization to go out to bid, to solicit numbers, to go to council business, we can certainly do that,
Not
but I don't.
particularly. I'm just thinking that this should go to the public for review.
Yeah, and I think when we have actual numbers, that has been the historical conversation of when we would do that.
Okay.
That way we can have a informed conversation with an actual contractor's name.
Thank you.
Council President, can I ask a question? When you say go out to public, I mean, we've been very public about this project for
Yeah, I
a
know.
long time. Are you saying just
No,
let everybody know that we're going to be voting on it or for contracts, or what do you mean having?
well, right now, we're talking about numbers, we're talking about project, we're talking about how it's going to work, which is fine, but it's going back to land use. It's really not going to business for a discussion. So at some point, when it goes to a business item, I'm just wondering when that was going to happen so that the public would be aware of where we are on this.
So
Yeah.
we have received requests from council before, and I'm not 100% sure who specifically off the top of my head, that when we do the bid award with how big of a project this is, and we have a named contractor, that goes to full council business. So as of now, I mean, obviously, if council has different opinions, we will certainly follow that, but that's the path we've been headed down.
Okay. Thank you. Do I have a motion? Councilmember Walsh?
I move to forward option 1 to the April 16, 2024 consent agenda for approval.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Oh. Now I'm looking for Bill.
I think he's about to sneak in the back door.
Bill's coming in the back door. Okay, so we're at item J, which is discussion of addition of the 2024 council goal prioritization of the airport issues. I believe there's some public comment from
He's pulling in the parking lot in a few
pulling in
moments.
person, so,
We were following the wrong betting pool.
okay. So
This should
just
be a
to,
7 o'clock ending meeting, and we
okay,
we
so
got it
just,
to the LSU
just to tee this up for everybody up here, I'm sure everybody knows why this is on here, but we had a presentation of our goals as a council, and the fifth one had to do with the airport.
Correct.
But it had never come through committee, so this is here to see if the council wants, or the committee wants to move it forward to make it a goal. So,
So Chair Dovey.
Go ahead.
Council members, originally this was going to be an update of where we are with airport issues because the next 2 years are going to be very, very time-consuming and exciting for this council and for our residents. And then at the March 19th Federal Way City Council meeting, as you can see from the slide, there was a recommendation for the mayor to add this whole process as an additional goal. And basically, there's what it would said: highlight air emissions, noise, safety issues in the upcoming SEA Airport Master Plan public process. And it was recommended to come to this committee. So here's your briefing. So we wanted to, the idea is to reaffirm what this committee does to deal with all the air issues, especially what's coming up with the master plan. Because the Port of Seattle is about to start the process for the Sustainable Airport Master Plan, and it's going to begin late in summer of '24. And of course, we're in April, May, we hit summer. We need to ramp up now because you know how things can delay, and that's when things are going to start happening. So basically, they're going to be proposing with this plan that passengers will increase to 66 million by 2034, and there'll be greater in noise and health impacts on the city, and this is going to be a $15 billion plan. It's talking about 19 additional gates, a new passenger terminal, high-speed taxi turnoffs, added cargo facilities, and 30 other projects. One of those projects is something that Dave Berger and Chris Hall from the Marine Hills community discovered when they did the big mayor's report that you all affirmed, that the previous council affirmed, is that the east runway that runs over Pack Highway is coming in at 2.75 degrees. The other two runways are 3 degrees. The port said, no, that's not true. And Chris Hall, who's an international consultant, said no, and they found the data, and so they said, okay, we will fix it, but it's going to take lots of complicated situations like, taxiways and antennas and ILS, et cetera, et cetera. So that is part of this plan too. But right now, planes over Pack Highway and all those homes and all those, apartments coming in at a shallower level, 2.75 degrees. This will bring it up to 3 like the other two runways. It was just an oversight, probably from the Lockheed TriStar DC-8 days. So that's what the project's all about. Here's the timeline, and I'm going to break it down for you with other slides. Number one, late summer, they released the draft documents, which we'll need time to analyze, and it'll take a lot of staff time. We may have to bring some people in. In the fourth quarter, we'll get the draft National Environmental Policy Act piece. We'll get 30 days notice with the document. We'll have 30 days to have us respond to what they're looking at for the airport. Then after that, in the second quarter of 2025, the State Environmental Policy Act document will become available. 30 days notice, 30 days to study, and then that'll be completed in the summer. And then after both those documents are done, then it goes to the Port Commission. So we basically have 3 opportunities to respond as a community, as a council, public meetings. We've been trying to extend it to 45 days or 60 days, and they've taken that under consideration. So that's under consideration, but the main deal is these are going to be complicated documents. We're going to need maybe outside expertise. It could be a budget item for us to focus on that, or at least, a staffing item. So-and-so, Bill needs to focus more on this, et cetera, et cetera. So the policy question is, should this committee recommend to the full city council the adoption of a 2024 council goal to prioritize airport issues with the Land Use Transportation Commission designated as the Land Use Committee. And now I believe we have the person who wanted to do some public comment on this subject, Dave Berger, if that's okay with the chair.
Mr. Berger, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Dovey and committee members and other council members. I am Dave Berger. For those of you, Mr. McDaniel, I don't think we've had the pleasure of meeting. I'm catching my breath. I literally ran up the stairs. I am a longtime resident of Marine Hills, and I also am pleased to be able to represent the mayor's office as one of the 2 citizen representatives to the Airport Advisory Committee of the communities south of the airport that are obviously impacted by airport overflights. And we appreciate the thousands of us who are impacted by the airport, appreciate the fact that this has been a priority item for City Council for a number of years, many years, and continues to be. And we urge that you, in order to give weight and recognition and visibility to this issue, add it to your strategic priorities as a goal, because it's been and will continue to require support from city staff and perhaps outside experts as well, particularly because the last few years during the pandemic, the issue of the airport expansion, which was a very hot issue just before the pandemic started, has been under the radar, no pun intended, for a few years, but will very, very soon be above the radar. The environmental impact reports, as you've just heard, will be released both at the federal and state level on the airport expansion plan, and that will be of very significant importance to all of us in the community, particularly those of us who live in the sacrificial corridor, as former state representative Pellicciati called us. So we urge that you have this goal as a high priority, just to reassure the community that you're very, very focused on this important issue, especially as the airport expansion plan environmental analysis comes forward, because as Bill said, the project of expanding the airport cannot be approved by the Port Commission before the environmental impact reports are dealt with and adopted. And I'm sure that we'll have lots and lots of comments and questions and criticisms of those documents when they come out. Thank you for the opportunity to address you. Happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Kochmar?
So, Dave,
Yes, ma'am.
nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
So I sat on the Airport Communities Coalition for 10 years. Are we still using Pack Highway as a glide path into SeaTac?
I'm sorry, Linda, I couldn't quite hear the question.
I'm sorry, are the planes still using the Pack Highway as the glide path into SeaTac?
Basically, with some variation depending upon where they're coming from the east, from the south, from the north.
So that's the turn point,
But
Pack
when they're in
Highway.
the you're talking about the landing and
The
path
landing.
in particular, yes.
Yeah. So,
Basically.
so there's never been any talk about going into SeaTac from the water side? Still, that's not on the,
There's been certainly a lot of talk on our part about that. It's documented in the report that we submitted, your Quiet and Healthy Skies Task Force report that we submitted back in 2018, specifically identified that as an alternative of flying over the water. So as far as we're concerned, that's one of the potential mitigations that ought to be considered in the environmental impact reports that will be coming out later this year and next year as well.
so, they kind of keep walking flying right over us.
Yeah.
And one of the issues 20 years ago was they weren't going to use Milton, the city of Milton. So 5,000 people in the city of Milton were wagging the tail of at that time it was about 75,000 people in Federal Way, because Milton didn't want them turning over the city of Milton. I think I don't know how we get people together to say, hey, you got to come in from the water side rather than down Pack Highway. It's like, we have people who live at Still Lake and I know you live in Marine Hills, and I know you're getting a lot of noise. They can see, they joke about seeing the pilot in the cockpit as they're on the downslope. I don't know how and are they even talking about a second regional airport? Is that dead?
No, it's dead, unfortunately. That committee
Amazing.
that the state legislature authorized to be set up and the governor appointed, studied it for a couple of years, looked at sites to the north, sites to the south, even sites to the east, and no one in any of those communities wanted a new airport.
So what is this?
So they just turned in a report saying nobody wanted an airport. Here are the potential sites, and even though the legislation required at least 2 sites be identified, they really failed to live up, in my opinion, to the legislative intent, which was to identify 2 sites.
Yeah.
Because they didn't actually identify 2 sites that they felt should be considered for a new airport.
So I only, saving grace would be to have everybody band together and insist that they come in from the water side rather than the Pack Highway side. I don't know what else to do, because.
Well, there's other mitigations we identified in your Quiet and Healthy Skies Task Force report of a steeper glide angle.
Yeah, steeper.
Which would significantly reduce the noise impact on
But
the
doesn't
neighborhoods.
that uses more more
Yes.
fuel, right? And that's why they won't do it.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're up
And-
against money and power, actually, at the moment.
And mitigation outside of the federal 65 DNL zone as well, which, because of, again, State Representative Pellicciati got that bill through a couple of years ago. A couple of years ago, Bill? I think it was a couple of years ago. Which now allows the state now has told the port they can mitigate outside that parabola all the way 12 miles south, all the way down into Federal Way.
Yeah,
So
that-
they can no longer say it's not authorized, it is authorized. They just have to be, from a policy standpoint, be willing to do it.
That was my next question. Can we, to be willing to do it? So how do we get the mitigation to put the soundproofing in on our homes from them?
Yes.
So
Yes, ma'am.
that's your goal.
All those are possibilities.
Okay.
And that's why it's important to engage them when the time
Sure.
comes for these environmental reports to come out.
Thank you. Well, let
As
us,
Chairman Dovey knows, from 20 years ago, he was on the council when the council did that on the third runway, and it's really important to engage them. That's the only time we have, the only opportunity we have is when they are about to take an
Yeah.
action,
Yeah.
is to engage them on the environmental level.
well, let us know what we can do to
We will.
put pressure.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember McDaniel?
Yeah, Crick, just because it's kind of new to me, some of this stuff, could you give me the reasoning why they've denied from the water side? Why they tell you Pacific's the way they're going to go, they won't even discuss the water side?
The FAA has, I can't address this as well as the other citizen representative who's a retired pilot,
Okay.
Mike Brigado. But my understanding is that they believe for safety reasons that it's important to have an established corridor. They've established the route. When I say they, I mean the FAA. This is not a port issue, this is an FAA issue.
Okay.
And they prefer, although pilots do have the legal authority to deviate from it, they direct them into that standard corridor. And in the Quiet and Healthy Skies report, we actually have a diagram that shows, it's like a scattergram, but it shows the concentration in that corridor of flights. So the vast majority of flights are in that corridor. They follow the FAA's guidance through the air traffic controllers, and they think that's the safest way to land the planes. We don't necessarily agree,
Yeah.
and it certainly ignores the noise and health impacts.
So the FAA is pretty much saying it's a safety thing for them?
Yes,
Okay.
that's what they say.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Honda?
Thank you. Thanks for being here. It's good to see you. How well are we working with the other airport cities as a city, as Federal Way? Are we working pretty well with other airport cities?
I'm sorry, Susan, I had a hard time hearing that.
That's
My
okay.
hearing's not the best. I
I have
apologize.
allergy problems, so it's hard to talk. Are we working well with other airport cities? Or could we work better with other cities?
Well, with respect to issues that come up on a day-to-day basis, and both at the local level, the state level, the federal level, I'd say we're doing fairly well. I mean, the reason that I couldn't be here earlier, and neither could Bill, is because we're on a subcommittee of the START committee, the Airport Advisory Committee, that happened to be meeting tonight, the federal policy, which is, by the way, morphing into a federal and state policy advisory committee. So we're going to be working with the other cities in the board on not just federal policy, but state policy as well. But there's always room for improvement. I know that the other cities have begun to organize, and again, this was more before the pandemic, on the anticipation of the impact reports, the environmental impact reports coming out. I don't personally know where that stands. Bill might know better where that stands now, but I would say that's probably something that should be pursued as we get closer and closer to those reports coming out, where those cities are, what the options are for working with them or independently.
Thank you.
Councilmember Walsh?
Do our interests and the interests of the other cities pretty much align, or are there very many differences between our interests and the interests of the other
That's
cities?
another good question, Jack. I think it's both. I think in the basic issues of noise and health impacts, they align, but some of the cities are affected differently than we are. Of course, part of Burien, in that central part of Burien and the north part of Des Moines, are eligible for mitigation packages. They've been eligible for 25 years.
Other of their residents are not, are impacted by noise. For example, the North Hill part of Des Moines is outside that area, and they are impacted. So I'd say their interests are similar to ours, but there are other residents who their concerns have been addressed, at least as far as noise is concerned. So I'd say yes and no. In some cases, yes, other cases, our interests are not aligned.
Okay. Now, the idea of a more of an approach from the water side, I mean, would that negatively impact some of our sister cities, neighborhoods in them?
Well, what we identified in the Quiet and Healthy Skies Task Force report as an alternative would be to fly over the water and come in over Salt Springs Park. So they would curve in at Salt Springs Park, and then they'd be in that same alignment. So that would help the residents, obviously of Federal Way, but also the south part of Des Moines that get no mitigation. They're not eligible for mitigation because they're outside of that existing established mitigation zone that the FAA recognizes and the port funds within. Does that answer your question, Jack?
Yeah, pretty well.
I guess a comment I'd like to make is, all the cities opposed the third runway and asked for many different things years ago. And Federal Way was outside of the area, and we spent a lot of money and didn't get a lot for our citizens. This time around, a reason why I think we should put it on as a main goal is, since they've extended the line and the mileage, we may eventually be able to get some of our citizens qualified for sound mitigation and things like that. How far?
12 miles.
What's 12 miles? How far into Federal Way is that? I think I'm 8 miles in Marine Hills, aren't I?
Yeah, it goes fairly far down into Federal Way.
Yeah, it goes.
Probably
past
not this far, but
320th anyway, right?
yeah. Yes.
So anyway, that would be a reason why we might want to move this forward out of committee, with this information only, but, anyway.
I think we need to be beginning to think about what kind of technical support would be necessary beyond city staff's expertise to critique those environmental reports. I wouldn't be surprised if the SEPA environmental document's over 2,000 pages. They'll try to overwhelm, as you saw 20 years ago, they'll try to overwhelm us with data and information. The question is, how accurate is it? How reasonable is it? I fully expect that the noise standard to determine impact will be that same 65, so-called 65 DNL standard that we, all of the cities on the port have agreed is outdated. We've commented over and over to the FAA about that. It makes no sense to take noise from an airplane and average it with no noise. And that's what that standard does. Take 120 decibels, which is about what an airplane, the level of noise of an airplane flying over my house, and average that with when there isn't an airplane flying over the house, and say, okay, that's 60 decibels. Well, 60 decibels isn't going to bother me. Well, the human brain doesn't register an average of noise, it registers noise. And so that, the notion of that is I think, kind of absurd, but that's the standard that's been used by the FAA, and they cling to that standard like it's magic, and all it is just an arbitrary number, and we think it needs to be reevaluated.
So Dave, you and I can be kind of the test things. When we moved to Marine Hills, we didn't wear hearing aids.
That's right.
Now we do. So.
They've ruined my hearing for
Yeah.
sure.
Okay, well.
Thank you very much.
We'll bring this, we can't really vote on this or do anything. It's information only, but the process will come through shortly, okay? Okay, next information only. Oh, Mr. Bill, do you have something you want to finish up?
Thank you. I was going to take it off
Oh,
for the next person.
okay, you're taking it off. That means Keith's turn to talk about RVs in the neighborhoods. And to tee this up, we all voted on recently RVs in the commercial zones, made changes. and now we said we wanted to talk about in the neighborhood. So this is the first step of that, and Barbara Marsh came and testified on this, and she did that before. So Keith, it's your turn to talk to us.
Good evening, Chair Dovey, committee members Walsh and Tran, Council President Kochmar, and City Council. This evening, we're going to talk about recreational vehicles. So the current issue, we don't have a policy issue in front of this council just yet, but the issue is the current code has limitations for parking RVs on residential property. And before starting to draft some code language for your consideration, I thought we would have this informational conversation to see if you guys can point me in the right direction before spend a lot of time drafting code. So this is our code right now. It's a lot of words, and basically what I'll tell you it says is the maximum size for a recreational vehicle that you can park on your lot is 9 by 22, unless, one, it is not detrimental to the character of the neighborhood. 2, the abutting property will not be impacted. 3, it will not create a potential fire hazard. And 4, it's accessory and owned by a resident of the property. It also does allow you to temporarily use it as a residence. So all of that being said, if there is a neighbor that calls in a complaint about a recreational vehicle on a property, in my opinion, you probably can't meet that criteria of not being detrimental to the character of the neighborhood because somebody in your neighborhood has turned you in. So this is what our code currently says. And so part of having a conversation about this evening, I looked at 6 cities, and they're listed here on the slide. So Issaquah allows an RV to be parked in the driveway, carport, or garage. Renton has a preference of garage or carport, side or rear yard at least 5 feet from the property line, and screened from the street. And then C is in the front yard, on the driveway, and perpendicular to the street. So not parallel, perpendicular. Kent has no more than 1. Screened from view by all neighbors and shall not be used for habitation. Bellevue is the only city I could find that puts a size dimension or limitation on the RV itself. They may not exceed 40 feet. They want it in the garage or carport or in a side or rear yard screened by a 6-foot tall fence or hedge. Or if no access to the rear or side, it can be in the front, but then if it's in the front, it could be no larger than 28 feet, outside the building setbacks, perpendicular to the street, screened from abutting property, and must be licensed and operable. Everett, in the front yard, must be on a driveway, must be owned by the property owner or a resident of the dwelling, and then the last one, Des Moines, may not protrude into the right-of-way or obstruct site visibility, only allowed in the front yard, I should say if no access to side or rear. The vehicles must be kept clean. I don't want to be the judge of that, and may not be occupied. All right, so that's kind of so what I wanted to show you here is everybody's doing this a little bit different. There are not really many cities that seem to be limiting the size of these things. Us and Bellevue seem to be it, and Bellevue has a bigger allowance than we do. So part of the conversation is there's actually classes of recreational vehicles. So the Class A motorhome is basically kind of the cool touring bus that you see in the upper left. Those are somewhere around 45 feet. The Class B is 25 feet, and then the Class C is 31 feet. And right now, we only allow 22 feet, which is smaller than the smallest category of recreational vehicle. So with all of that being said, I want to have a conversation with you guys. This is kind of like a menu of choices here. And what I want to hear is any preference to limiting the size, to limiting the location, limiting one, screening from neighbors, making them be licensed and operable, owned by property owners, may not protrude into the right-of-way and may not be occupied. I will come back to this slide because I think this is the slide of importance. Because this is a amendment to Title 19, this has to go through the Planning Commission. So unlike the previous ordinance where we were limiting it to not commercial streets, that didn't touch Title 19, so that could come straight to this committee and then the council. But here, we're going to have to go to Planning Commission. So from a timeline standpoint, I'm guessing I need this month and maybe a little bit of next to write code. It'll go to Planning Commission in June, back to LUTC in July, and then to full council in August. In the meantime, for those code compliance issues on RVs, we've kind of suspended them administratively for now. So from now until, if the timeline holds true, August, people won't be getting nasty letters from the city. So with that, looking for some suggestions from the council, if you have any, on which one of these things seem like pushes us in the right direction.
Sorry, Keith, can I also jump in and
Oh,
just add
absolutely.
one additional detail, which is this piece of code, our current code applies to RVs and boats. So as we're changing this, I think we need to be intentional about boats as well, as part of this code, and whether that should be the same as RVs or whether it should be different or otherwise. So just throwing the nautical vehicle into play for you guys to consider as well.
Agreed, yeah.
So does RVs, boats, and trailers fit into the same?
It's just RVs and boats,
What about trailers?
not mentioned as part of this code. So
Should be
a trailer that's an RV, a trailer RV, one that's not self-propelled, that would still be an RV, if that makes sense. But like a standard trailer that's just open to the air, that's not an RV trailer. Yeah,
So a fifth wheel.
fifth wheel.
Fifth wheel
trailer is
counts.
considered an RV?
correct,
And a
Yep.
trailer that you stick on your bumper hitch is an RV?
correct.
But a construction trailer is what you were referring to?
That's correct,
Okay,
yes.
thank you. Councilmember McDaniel, you got your light on first.
Yeah, I'm looking at this stuff here. The first one is the ROW. What is that classified? So-
Right away.
So like, what is that, like, if I'm into the parking, am I into the sidewalk or am I into the street?
So if there's sidewalks, typically the right-of-way to right-of-way is back of sidewalk to back of sidewalk, a couple feet behind the sidewalk, actually. So this would be your RV is sticking out past the sidewalk and into the curb area.
Okay.
And I'll jump in there too, to add a little bit more context. I think most people drastically underestimate how far the right-of-way line is in what they think their front yard is. I'll just use my house as an example, which is not in Federal Way, but I have a fence and landscaping behind the sidewalk that is still in the right-of-way.
So right-of-way is not my personal property line, it's what's been designated?
Right-of-way is the end of your personal property and the start of the public street right-of-way.
But unless you've had it surveyed, most people don't know where their property line is.
That's correct, yep.
And we're not classifying sidewalks as property in this conversation, are we?
Sidewalks will, in almost every single instance, be inside the right-of-way and off of private property.
Yes.
Then just looking at this one, my big one is the size limitations. I don't know if there's a requirement for size limitations as long as they make it decently positioned and placed. Some of this other stuff, I don't know about the screening one. I do like the limit to one. The non-occupied, I actually know people who are occupying them. I really throwing that one up in the air to you guys to kind of give an idea on that one. I don't want them living for the long term on that one. But I like the owned one, and it has to be operable. I don't want them broken down for the most part in my mind. But those are my kind of considerations.
So you're starting a little Ben Franklin checklist there, Keith?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Councilmember President?
Well, rather than reinventing the wheel, by the way, my name is Council President Kochmar, just thought it,
I just.
just giving you a hard time.
I'll just, yeah, Honda, Linda, Susan.
Whatever. Yeah, that's okay. Just say hey you. So Keith, on the City of Bellevue requirements, they seem to be the most comprehensive. rather than reinventing the wheel, how are those working?
I have not talked to any Bellevue staff. I could do that, Council President, to see if they have concerns about these particular code limitations. If ultimately that's one of your suggestions, I will definitely follow up with Bellevue staff on that.
And just curious, because, obviously looks like they've done a lot of work on coming up with those ideas, and, if it's working, let us know.
Okay, we can do that.
Councilmember Walsh.
Yeah, with, if you want to go back to the other one again. Okay. Yeah, the size limitation, I think that we should dispense with that personally. With the, and I agree with Paul, limit to one. And it should be licensed and operable and owned by the property owner, resident, or residents. Not protruding the right of way, agree there. With the occupied, I think that we need to, I'm not quite sure how to put that. I mean, it certainly shouldn't be permanently occupied. However, I know that there's the cases where people are doing a remodel of their home and temporarily they have that there, or mom and dad come to visit and they're in it for a week or so. I'm not quite sure how we would put that into code. But I think that there should be some exceptions to not being occupied, but we need to be careful that it doesn't put a foot in the door for things that we don't want. And I'll leave it to your genius to figure that out.
And I'll just say that the current code requirements with respect to living in it, you can sleep in it for up to 14 days in any 180-day period.
Yeah,
Currently.
I mean, that seems, that seems reasonable.
And then by written request, you can actually occupy it for up to 12 months in the case of an emergency or disaster, like damage to the primary residence, for
Okay,
instance.
yeah, I that seems, I think that, boy, our current code's the right place in some things, so anyway. I kind of like if you want to go back to what the other cities have, is only allowed in the front yard if no access to side or rear, something like that. I mean, it should be preferable that it be in the rear or side rather than the front. But however, my own house, I mean, that would be an impossibility. Unfortunately, I'm not planning on getting an RV in the near future, but anyway. So anyway, those are my main. I mean, it's great if it's screened, but I don't know if that should, whether that being part of the code. I think that screened is definitely preferable, but whether that should be part of the code, I'm up to discussion on that. So those are that's my input.
Councilmember Honda?
Thank you. I would like to see it screened. I don't think I would like to look out my window and see my neighbor's RV or boat all the time. I'm wondering if we need to say something in there that the RV or boat needs to move at least once a year, so that it's not continually parked there and not moving at all. I don't know how we would monitor that. I'm sure the neighbors would. But if it's, if someone has an RV or a boat or a trailer and they're not using it, and it just stays there forever without ever moving, that could be an issue. Thank you.
So I'll give you my thoughts on this. I think we should make the HOAs of each neighborhood the overruling principle, because people who have RVs or boats or whatever, they choose where they want to live, and if they choose to move into a certain neighborhood that restricts having RVs, then that code that's already there for the restriction of the people who bought there should take precedence over how we change it. After that being said, I think we need to make it very user-friendly. If someone buys an RV and they want to put it on their private property and it doesn't go into the right-of-way, then we should make that happen. I've been driving around Federal Way, and the thing that drives me crazy is when people park them in their front yard on the grass, and it looks like, you know, somewhere out in Arkansas in the field. So we might want to make sure that they have a parking pad, but I don't think we should restrict the length. And if you look at this, everybody that's bought a Sprinter van or one of those little RVs may be out of compliance in Federal Way parking in their driveway.
Yep.
And lastly, I mean, this may sound kind of different coming from me, but we just went through all this process of ADUs, and to say that now you can't live in your RV if you have your child or your mother or somebody because you need an ADU, we're restricting what we just said for affordable housing that we wanted to do. So I could go either way on that, but I do not want to trump the HOAs that already have rules and make it different than what people moved into.
And just to be clear, although my attorney wants to talk, but, so whatever HOA rules apply would still apply.
Okay, they would take precedent over however we change it.
Yeah, so the only difference there potentially is, you know, the code that you guys just passed limited or restricted RV parking on commercial streets.
Yes.
If you wanted to do the companion ordinance that would basically take them off all streets,
And
that's what needs to come with this
Yeah.
at some point.
And that's I guess the last part that I forgot to articulate. I don't want any RVs on any street. What was proposed, that you could move it to your neighbor's house or move it this way and that, doesn't make sense, because we'll get all sorts of calls. So make it legal. I would like to make it legal on people's property. They're not legal anywhere on the street, and then we don't have that, you know, neighbor calling on neighbor.
To the HOA CCNR precedence question, it's a little more nuanced, actually. So if the HOA regulation is more restrictive than the city regulation, then the HOA regulation will control.
Okay.
However, if the HOA is more permissive than the city regulation, then because the city regulations are the more, or are the less permissive rules, the city regulations would control. So let's say you live in an HOA, the HOA covenants don't say anything about RVs. If the city code has regulations on RVs, those are going to be the regulations that apply. Whereas if you have a HOA where it says you can't have an RV at all, period, outside of your home, that's going to be the controlling over whatever that city regulation is.
You articulated it well.
Yeah.
Council President.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
I just
Nice to meet you.
I just forget.
Okay. I'd like to ask Barbara Marsh, could you come to the podium, Barbara? I know that you mentioned that our rule said nothing over 22 feet, but you didn't tell us how long yours is.
Ours is 31 feet, but it
31.
fits. We've got a parking, it's not paved, but it's gravel. We dug out. It's horizontal to the street. We have no sidewalks on our street. So I don't know how that's affected what the right-of-way is. It's just the street, but it's off the street. Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, because I don't know anything about RVs or,
It's a Class C.
It's a Class C.
It's big. And
Sure.
the thing was upsetting is we get this notice, and if we'd have known that Federal Way had a rule, that's the big thing. If you guys come up with rules,
Yeah.
that's specific and that's
Sure.
maybe making it harder, you really need to advertise it, because we wouldn't have bought the 31-foot thing if we
Yeah.
thought we couldn't park it there. We just
Yeah.
bought it last July.
yeah, I'm wondering why Bellevue said 28 feet when the Class C is 31 feet.
Well, they come in different sizes. They
Uh-huh.
can be as small as
Well, it doesn't
22
seem to
feet.
be that much different, 28 versus 31, so it seems
Right.
silly to.
Well, and the thing with your rule is said it was 9 feet tall. Ours couldn't be above 9 feet. Well, all these the bigger ones aren't higher than 9 feet tall. So, you know, we could put it, we have a side yard, we could put it behind, and we have, you know, a gate there. So it's gonna be, the other question is your screening. I mean, do we have to screen, you know, maybe it's 10 feet, I don't know how tall it is. Do we have to screen 10 feet, or is just, you're just seeing the top above the 6-foot fence? You know,
Yeah.
that's a question you're gonna need to answer too.
Okay, and you don't live in an HOA?
No,
Right.
I live in the Twin Lakes area, but I don't live in the Twin Lakes HOA, and I have a feeling that the person that drove around lives in Twin Lakes HOA.
Oh. So
They
there were,
can't park it there, there's none,
sure, so there were 20 people in your area that,
20 people, and as
Did
far
they
as I
all-
could tell, not one of them moved. I don't know which were the 20 in my neighborhood, but we were the only ones that moved ours.
so they all have the same size vehicles,
Um,
basically?
Ours is big, but there's some that are that size. There's big trailers. You can get a trailer that big. And most of them are, I mean, there's a couple that are on the lawn that looks bad. But most of them are either parked in the driveway, or someone has put a driveway or some kind of parking pad next to it, or they're off the street. And
Okay.
for the most part, they're not, I mean, there are a few ugly, broken down ones,
Yeah.
but they're just, you know, regular camping trailers that people have.
Yeah, I look at my neighbor's camping trailer all the time, I don't have a problem with it.
When we had ours, we had bought I mean, it's an older RV, but we had bought a brand-new cover for it. It was covered for the winter.
Yeah,
You
my
know, I mean,
neighbor
the-
did that
not-
as well.
Not a tarp, but, you know, a regular
cover.
cover. And I mean, maybe
Right.
you have to require people to cover them, or keep the covers up, because sometimes you will see
Yeah.
people with, you know, 10-year-old
Yeah.
tarp kind of hanging
Yeah.
in the wind, you know.
Yeah, the cover works great, and that's what my neighbor has, it looks fine, yeah. Anyway, thank you, Barbara,
Oh,
for
you're welcome.
answering my questions. So,
I would like, Barbara, I would like to thank you for bringing this to the council's attention. And it's, you know, it's because of residents such as you that brings things to the attention that we can fix things. I mean, you can't fix something that you can't fix a problem if you don't know it exists. So thank you.
Councilmember Honda?
Thank you. So Keith, if it wasn't a paved parking pad and it was gravel, what do you think that would look like?
It needs to be paved,
It has to be paved?
yeah, because there's a stormwater issue with vehicles parked on gravel.
It's a similar regulation that applies to parking of all vehicles of any sort in our front yards. They have to be on a driveway or an approved parking pad.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Daniel?
I actually have a question on that. My driveway is not paved, so.
You better pave it tomorrow.
No, I ain't paving anything, baby. But, no, but. I
The
mean-
weather's just getting right.
Yeah, it is. But I would be curious to know more on that one, because most of my neighborhood is not paved. There's no sidewalks, there's no pavement, and there's a lot of trailers. So I'm curious to see how this, because this is really going to affect the 6 blocks around my neighborhood, so I'll be curious to know that one. And I'm curious on the coverings and that stuff. That's an extreme expense that gets added to the cost.
Yep.
So you pretty much made it price prohibited for people to have recreational vehicles when you start adding those. I get it that people want it, but it's my property, so my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, I hear you. There's dollar signs with all of this stuff. Yep.
And I'll jump in there too. This gets a little bit more nuanced, but frequently let's assume for a second that even those gravel driveways weren't up to current code requirements, which I'm not sure if that's the case or not, but.
I'm sure it is.
Maybe. There are a lot of gravel driveways. But even if they're not up to current code requirements, if that gravel driveway was established prior to the code that required driveways to be paved, it may be legally non-conforming. And that means it's still legal, you're grandfathered in
Okay, that's what I
essentially,
was gonna ask, is
potentially. Yes, sorry, that's the
Okay.
more colloquial way of saying it. Yes, you're grandfathered in, so frequently that's a reason why that's still okay.
Hi, thank you. I appreciate that.
It's still not good, though, just to be clear.
Thank you, Keith.
And,
Thank you, Keith.
And Councilmember McDaniel, I'd encourage you to call the code enforcement department if you'd like to self-complain.
so.
I've already got my complaints in going.
So a question I have is, you know, we hear so much about impervious surfaces, and we're trying to go to things that water go through. So why would this is a question, gravel which is impervious, that has rock there, why would that not, why would you have to pave it?
So I'll give you my version of
yeah, your
stormwater,
version.
and I might ask the EJ to help. So there's clean surfaces and dirty surfaces, and that
Right.
relates to whether vehicles are on them or not. So for
Yeah.
example, your roof can go directly into the ground and into a rain garden, that's all great,
But,
right?
well, yeah,
But if you're parking vehicles which tend to drip fluids, we don't want those infiltrating into the ground and potentially intercepting with groundwater.
But like my driveway is on a slope.
Yes.
If my car leaks and it rains, it's gonna go it's gonna go down the driveway, out to the gutters. I
And
mean,
into the storm system.
into the storm system versus, I don't know. You're gonna have to convince me on that one.
Yeah, I was just going to say, do you know how far down that aquifer is that you're trying to reach with your oil? I mean, it,
That, you got some
I have direction.
marching orders?
I do. Thank you all so much for this. It's been super helpful.
Okay. Thank you all. We will now adjourn our meeting at, no, wait. Future agenda, we're going to have it on May 6th at 5 PM. And now we're going to adjourn.